Okay, we are live. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back and welcome, Melinda. It is so good to have you on with us today.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming back because you've been on to do a live read before and shared a little bit about Curse Breaker, which was super exciting. And if you're watching and you didn't catch that video, you can check that out in my Indie Author Live Reads playlist, because you definitely want to take advantage of the free sneak peek into this world. But Melinda, for those who didn't catch that live and don't really know much about your writing, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the very vast world of books that you have going?
Well, they all started because of this guy. So the Chris Breaker Enchant is the one that started it all, and it is an epic fantasy adventure about a young man who is trying to master his powers before they control him, save his family and his underground city. And then it grew into prequels and a side series starring his sister, which is getting new covers. So, of course. And 10, well, now 10 books in his series aside from that, and a side quest or two. So
So
yeah, it's
exciting.
fun. It's noble
So,
bright fantasy, so the world is not perfect, but they're trying to make it better, and they live in a world where they can actually make it better. It's not one of those worlds where things are bad and they're only going to get worse. And yeah,
right.
it's not Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no, I feel like your book is more noble, bright
Hmm.
fantasy in that
Very
regard,
much.
and that there's a very healthy handed dose of hope throughout
Yes.
the book.
Yes.
And so I know some of my readers, because I write dark fantasy. If you're a dark fantasy lover, there are some elements, though, in this series that are a little darker, too.
Yes.
I mean, there's using other people's loved ones against them to manipulate them and coerce them into doing things and overcoming that. But there's always a good lighting of hope, and that really makes your stories stand out. um, was it difficult to balance that darkness with the hope and the brightness of the story?
Um, no, because I prefer hope and all the light stuff. So anytime the story went dark, I'm like trying to tug it back the other way. Sometimes they want to go Game of Thrones and I want to go Lord of the Rings. So we're in a tug of war sometimes. Some books more than others. In some of the later books, they're a little more interesting. Some of them skew a little more cozy because we've done the big mountaintop, you know, big we fought the big bad and we finally defeated them, and now we need to rebuild, we need to fix things. We have all this other stuff that we've been just sort of ignoring that we now have to deal with, some smaller problems, but they are problems that actually grow into some larger conflicts because they've been letting it sit and fester for like 6 7 books. um,
Wow, wow.
and sometimes we do like the fun, like the book 10 is that they've been through all this stuff, and some of the secrets that they've been keeping have come out, and now they've got to deal with the fallout from that. And then this magical crystal arrives, and the one person who can examine it is hurt and is recovering. So his son is trying to like, well, I'll figure it out. I've spent enough time around dad. I can and then he's a kid, so his uncle and other characters are like, no, you should definitely not be touching this, let your dad look at it. So there's this hilarious like thing. He's trying to get the crystal, they're all trying to keep it away from him. And eventually his dad will look at it, and chaos will continue to unfold from there. But it's a little bit more of a fun book because the books before were a little like very emotional,
Yeah.
because there was a lot of like stuff. They weren't like high fantasy. They were a little more lower. There's still a lot of magic, but it wasn't like big save the world. It was, we're just trying to save one specific person that we care about, who helped us out with a lot of the big scary monsters and world saving stuff from other books, and now they're in trouble and we're trying to help them with
Yeah.
with a smaller life problem that just happens to have a magical bent because they live in a fantasy world, so
Yeah.
you can't have small relationship problems. There's got to be demon possession and magic crystals and spells that go awry.
And all the wonderful classic
Yeah,
um
I
classic
mean, why
fantasy
not?
things, but in
It's
a but in a very unique modern way that people can relate to, I think as well.
I hope
So
so.
family is a very
Yes.
important theme in your books.
Yes.
Um,
It's a
how
through
has your
line.
family felt about your writing journey? Did they know you were writing, or did you just
Yes.
publish one and then be like, "What?"
Oh no, I created the world that they live in when I was really, really little. And so I used to tell my sister stories set in the world, and she told me, she was always telling me, Melinda, you gotta write them down. It's great that you want to tell me these stories, but go write them down and so other people can read them. And eventually, like I think it was in middle school, I started trying to do that. But I still it's different when you're telling someone a story. You can tailor it, you can see their reaction, and that's kind of fun. So I wasn't as interested in writing it then, and even up to like into the 2010s when I was like in my 30s, like I was still not as interested in writing it as like telling it to people because that was more fun. And then unfortunately she passed away, but before she passed away she like made me promise that I would write them and publish them. And since I couldn't tell them to her anymore, like that's what I did. And
Oh,
writing them became my way of telling the story to her, because it
oh,
progressed like so far beyond the stories that I told her. So yeah, and I write little notes to her in the back of the book. I don't know if people have noticed. I've done it in every single one.
oh,
Some little thing that I hope Amazon will deliver it to heaven, and I hope you enjoyed it. There's X thing that
oh,
you like is in here, and there'll be more stuff like that. And I was posting on her Facebook page because it still exists every time one of the books came out. Um, but then it's very sad going on there. So
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So so you have firsthand experience with
yeah,
the loss and pouring this in to the book, and really, I guess, Soren's struggle uh, to not want to lose his family. Um,
yeah, it's hard. He lost his, and I never meant for him. He had a younger half brother. He was supposed to have another brother, but somehow like it like changed and it became a sister. And then I was like, oh well, I'll just make her like my sister, be like an homage. And then writing the 4 books, and so there's 4 so far. I've got a couple more outlined that are in her
yeah,
series. She ended up becoming like me instead of like my sister, which still cracks me up because I meant for her to be like my sister, but she ended up like me instead. Because I'm more happy go lucky, and like the crazy situations that she finds her and it's like herself in, it's just it worked out better having a main character who's like, oh well, that plan failed. Let's try something else. Instead of like my sister would have been like, cursing up a storm and like angry, and she's just like, well, now we know that doesn't work. And it makes for a much more humorous story
yes.
because her
So,
situation is pretty crazy. Like she's dead, and yeah, so it's a total different thing. Like her whole series, she's dead in it, and she ends up getting tangled up with angels and demons, and end up saving the whole the world where her family is still living, and ends up becoming at the end of the 4th book she ends up accidentally becoming the angel of death.
oh,
But up to book 10 in the series where I'm writing, like her brother and her nephew and her 2 brothers, and her family doesn't know, but some other characters in the First Speaker series do know because they found out accidentally, and everybody's like, nope, we'll just wait until he finds out. We're not telling Sarn. We don't want to be around for that conversation.
yeah.
So we'll see
So
in her 5th book how that works out.
Sarn's a magic user
Yes, he's
too. In a world where if someone picks up the first book, they might be like, "Why does everybody hate on the magic user
well.
so much?"
Okay, so imagine you're living in a country and the entire country is 90% enchanted forest. And enchanted forest has 3 rules. You can't do any harm, you can't start any fires, and you can't carry any weapons. But there's a bunch of caveats to the weapon thing because they don't like metal with an edge to it. So you can carry bows around, you can carry arrows of the flint head, which is more popular around there, and they don't actually notice. But you can't cut down a tree. So where do you get fire? Where do you get heat? How do you cook? So you end up having to get crystals that so Sarn can make the crystals glow. There's other types of crystals that can heat things. There's other types of crystals that will keep things cold. But then you have this whole your whole life is based around, well, if I want to go somewhere, I got to hike through this enchanted forest and be really careful not to upset them because the trees are sentient. The entire time you're walking, they're watching you. You know they're watching you. So wandering around is a little bit like difficult. There is a navigable river system through most of the country, but river travel is obviously very expensive because people, lots of people don't want to go through the forest. They'd rather go on the river. So if you will pay lots of money, they will charge you lots of money. So it's kind of expensive. So most average people can't afford river travel. And river travel is dangerous because you can't attack people in the forest, but you can attack people on the river. There's literally no rules. So there's a lot of, if that's where people who have a lot of money are traveling on the water, there would be a lot of pirating and a lot of like drama like that. So
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got it's kind of difficult to get around the country. The forest is very thick, so there's not roads, so it's not easy to get around. So commerce is kind of difficult. And if you don't want to, you have only a couple of options for living arrangements. There's a couple of natural valleys where the enchanted forest decided, well, we don't feel like going down in there, so there is no enchanted forest in the valley. So you can live in the valley, but what are you going to build a house out of? You can't cut down a tree. The tree will kill you if you try. And so you have to build it out of stone. Like, it's not easy to live there. But, some people do live in the enchanted forest. They pick up the deadfall, which the forest doesn't care. If a limb falls in the forest, you may pick it up. It doesn't care about that. You just
Yeah,
can't cut
yeah.
it off the tree. And they build tree houses and live in like communities in there, but they're they're mostly like insular and
Very
they don't.
strict.
Yeah, they're well, not very strange, but they're just like
No, no, not strange,
they're
strict. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. They're like, you know what? If we respect the forest, it will take care of us. Because I mean, from their point of view, you can't fight, you can't harm people, you can't really carry edged weaponry around. So it's like, well, it'd be pretty safe to live here as long as we don't piss off the forest. So no fires, no anything. So from that point of view, but there's also underground cities, and that's where Sarn lives, and that's where a lot of people who don't like magic end up living. And that's not exactly the nicest place to live because there's no sunlight. Yeah, so it's not the easiest of lives, and they resent the magic for that reason. And it's sort of a love hate kind of relationship. There's also this religious faction who's very much against magic, very much into technology, and so they go around hunting for people who have any sort of magic and kill them because the law is you can't have magic. So they're like, oh, we're just upholding the law. But there's also the Queen of All Trees, who's one of my favorite characters. She is a giant, sentient, magical tree who roams around. She's not a real big fan of men. She had some problems with them in the deep past. But I mean, she's not going to harm you if you don't piss her off. So if you're wandering around the forest there, please don't piss her off. Don't hang trees. They will harm you. They're not nice. Like, they're not going to leave you alone. But yeah, and she's a big fan of women. So if you're a lady wandering around the forest there, you have a less. It's really hard for you to piss her off. You'd have to really work hard to anger her, and she's a symbol of hope to a lot of people because if you need help, like, and you call to her, like, she will come and she will try and help you. So like there's like this schism. There's some people who absolutely hate magic who want to and there's some average people who like magic because from their point of view, like, it's safe. It's an enchanted forest, so it doesn't have to follow the rules of nature. Like, there are berries and it provides for them, actually, the people who live in uh, those treetop villages, because, like, it's kind of difficult to hunt and stuff. You're not supposed to do harm. There are ways to do it that the forest allows, but because there's a sort of trade-off. If you're going to live within the forest, and the forest is like, well, we're going to provide you with some food to eat as well. So it's a give and take sort of a situation that some people really just want to take. They don't want to give. So
Right, right.
I got way too into detail on that.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry. It's
fine.
just kind of complicated. And there's another group of people that are tinkers and tradesmen who do travel through the forest and respect it and bring news and goods around. And so there's a lot of different enclaves, and there's a lot of different ways that people live. I'm not always able to show it because Sarn does live in an underground city and he can't leave it. you can't go very far from it, but I have other characters who can roam around, so we will see in other series how other people live because
Yeah.
they don't all live the same way in this complicated world.
I love it. Makes me think so much of what Tolkien said once
I love
about
his stuff.
reading uh, one of the classics and thinking the trees were alive and them saying that it was actually people disguised like trees. And he was so disappointed, and that's what inspired the Ents. This
I've
makes
heard
me think
that.
so much of like the Ents, but on a much more protective level.
Sometimes I wonder if that's where I got like this crazy thing because like I think I saw one of the like animated like Lord of the Rings
Yes.
movies when I was really, really little, like too little. Like I don't remember it at all, but like every once in a while, someone on TikTok will have like a song or something from one of the like Rankin and Bass ones, and I'm like, I know this song. I must have seen either part of the movie or because I never had much of an attention span as a kid, so I can guarantee I did not see the entire thing. I don't think I watched a movie from end to end until I was like a teenager because then I had finally
Yeah.
had enough attention span. Like even a 30-minute cartoon was like so
So you grew up loving fantasy,
yes.
and is that sort of what got you into writing?
Um I'm not. I mean, it's like I think what got me into writing was really my sister telling me to write down these stories because I was always making up fantasy stories. It was only when I was 15 and I went to like the library and I was just like I read all the like it's I live in a small town in Putnam County, New York, and it was a very small library. And I'd read like all the Nancy Drews, all the Hardy Boys. Like I read all the things that you read as a young adult, and I was like, I need something else to read. And like, I was like, Ma, I don't want to reread something upstairs. I read all of it. And so she's like, all right, then you can look around the adult section, but I have to approve the book before you can take it out. I need to make sure you're not like picking up something that I don't want you reading. Um, so I was wandering around the adult section, like I never looked around there except to find my mom previously. And but I did, when you're a kid and you're looking for your mom, looking at the books, you're not paying attention to what the sections are. And I was just
Yeah.
wandering around and I found tucked away in this corner, this little section of books that I'd never seen before. And they were fantasy books. And I took, and I was like, there was the L. Ron Hubbard, there was the Shannara, there was
Yeah.
Mercedes Lackey. I don't remember what was on the shelf below. It was only 5 shelves in this small, like 3 foot space. And I don't remember what was on the other 2 shelves. And I took out one of the Mercedes Lackey books and like, it had the pretty fantasy cover. It was like the Winds of Fate. And I read the back of it and I was like, okay, this is interesting. Princess. And so I started reading the first chapter, and my mom found me like later. I'd read like several chapters already. I was like, "Mom, I'm taking this book out from the library." I'd never seen a fantasy book before. I actually didn't read The Lord of the Rings until 2001 when the first movies came out. I didn't I didn't know it existed until then. Like I said,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't remember the animated films at all. I still can't remember them at all, but like every once in a while, a song will be like somewhat familiar, and I'm like, I must have seen a clip of it or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
and that's when I realized that like people actually were writing the stories that I was telling to people. Like before that, like all I'd seen were like mysteries, like Nancy Drew and all that. Like I didn't know people were writing fantasy books.
That's amazing.
And that's when I started
Wow.
thinking about it, and like I showed my sister, and I told her about it because she was 4.5 years younger than me. So if I didn't have a clue, she had less of a clue. I love her. I love her to pieces, but like because of the age difference, and that's when she started telling me, well, you should write them down. If other people are doing this, you should do it too. That's when that
Oh
whole thing kind of
wow.
started.
So you were like the Wendy darling of
I
your
guess
family.
maybe,
And then you brought
maybe,
your sisters like write them down for us. Thank you so much to your sister. Oh goodness. So the indie route um, is really exciting, but it's also
yeah,
really hard.
yeah.
What brought you to the indie publishing scene?
Well, I work in corporate publishing, and like from everything I've seen, I was like, no, 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 no. I'd rather do this indie and figure it out. Just all the things I've seen, and like to be fair, like I work in academic publishing, which is there
Mm-hmm.
is, but we also have done a couple of like nonfiction books and one fiction book. The company and just seeing how that was done, and like I was like, no, no, yeah, just yeah, no, just and seeing also like you get so little of the you get so little back from it. Like they keep so much of the proceeds from it, and it's like if I'm gonna do this, like it has to be like self sufficient. I can't be like bleeding money because I have to also be able, I live in New York. I have to also be able to pay the mortgage, the gas to get to work. So it's like and doing it the try and it's also with traditional publishing, you have to query and get an agent, and that could take forever. And like I was like, I'm in New York, like there's and so and like being in New York is kind of different in working in publishing. You hear people complaining about the unsolicited manuscripts, the slush pile, how all they get in is like thousands and thousands of manuscripts that are just not good, and trying to find that one diamond in the rough is really difficult. I've actually interviewed for jobs at the major publishers, but I didn't get them. So that was before I got the role that I'm at now. But yeah, and it's like and I was actually I don't remember which one I was at for the interview, but like I actually overheard editors complaining about the slush pile. It was as I was sitting there in the interview room in the lobby, and I was like, oh, okay. So just all those things, like when it came around, I was like, you know what? I after my sister passed away, I started like seriously like putting together Cursebreaker Enchanted, and oops, this blurs me. And I that's when I started blogging because like I was just like bereft. Like it was like her death was very sudden. It was an accident, and like nobody there was no sign that it was coming or anything. Like she was 29. She went away on vacation, and then I got a call that she was dead. And like you just don't think that's going to happen to your 29-year-old little sister. So it took a long time to get. I'm still grieving for her, but it's better. Like I'm much better now. And one of the ways that I was grieving for her, like I just kept hearing her voice in my head. You need to write these down. You need to publish this. And like that seemed like such a huge monumental task as you're being crushed by grief. So I started a website. I started the website that I have now, and then it was a blog, and I just started writing little scenes from starring some of my favorite characters, some of the things, and just interacting with people that are sort of blogging their fictional stories or their poetry. And I just did that for a year and built up a yep, that's the site, and made friends, built up maybe a small little audience, and they were really wonderful, welcoming people, and they urged me to finish the book and publish it. And so I put together some of the blog posts because I blogged like this entire Christmas adventure, and I did it in verse because somebody dared me, so I did the whole thing in verse, and I put that together as a collection because some people, because it was like 50 or 60 posts. And I said, look, I'll put it together so it's easier to read. They were like the most popular posts on my blog. Like these would get hundreds of hits. And I was like, I'll just put this together into an ebook. And then it'd be me practicing putting it together into a book. And then if instead of people trying to find all these things and read it in sequence, they can just get it in one little place.
Right.
And so I did that. I looked all around and figured it all out, and I put it up on Amazon, and actually sold. Like people actually bought it, and I was like surprised. I was like, okay, well, and it wasn't, and that just sort of broke the ice. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't hard. It was just figuring out all the bits and bobs.
Yeah.
What fields do you fill in? What do you? The hardest thing was, what do I call this thing? you know. And I'm gonna rewrite all of those that story that in prose, not in verse. And it was going to be the 12th book in the series, but characters have decided that that's not what's going to happen. So hopefully next year it'll be coming out. Hopefully it'll be book 13 or 14. But they don't listen to me, so they may decide to do another adventure in that book and push it off for another book. So that's a to be continued on that one.
We just go wherever the book takes us, right?
They don't like outlines. I create them, and they like to set them on fire and sprinkle the ashes all around. And I keep making them, and they keep trashing it. And then eventually they get into a situation where like, okay, save me now. It was like,
yeah,
I can't save you if you get into situations that I don't know how to fix. But I do find that the worst problem was in Cursebreaker Hidden. They like I didn't know how I was going to save them, but thankfully I found I had a solution in book two. I was like, oh thank God, I had a way that I planted in there that I didn't even know I was planting something I would need later. It was just like, oh, there's this cool thing in this world. Let me just since they're passing by it, let me mention it. And then when I was rereading it, I was like, oh, I forgot to put that in there, but now I can use it.
Yes.
This is not the God and the machine thing. It was in book two. It's part of their world.
Yes.
And it was these little creatures. So in book six, it starts in book three, but somebody finds this chamber full of crystals that eat magic. And so all of the enchanted crystals in the place that give you light and heat and keep things temperature controlled, that all goes out. So people are living under a mountain. There's complete darkness. And there was a monster that was in the same area and they freed the monster too. So there's this giant monster in the dark killing people. And
Oh
it was
gosh.
yeah, and then they also in there was like it was just the cascade of bad. This also triggered something else that I had set up that I didn't think we were going to be doing this soon in the series, and they released this evil spirit. So you've got all these. So you've got the crystals that are eating magic. So Sarin's not going to be much help in this because if it takes away his magic, he's going to die. So yeah, it was a really big problem. We dealt with the monster. We deal with the monster in that book. We dealt with the evil spirit in the book five, and in book six, I'm like, okay, we got to get rid of the monster. We've got to deal with these crystals. You know, we can't have them continue to eat magic. And then when I was reading book two, I found that I had the Andorite, which are these little microbes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess they're a little bigger than a microbe because you can actually see them. They clump together into these glowing colonies. They make magic. That's what they do. They just excrete magic. That's what they do. So I knew they were in the world. I didn't realize that I put them under the mountain in a similar area. They like water, so I was like, oh, perfect. We'll just flood the cavern with the Andrai and they then they'll have so then the crystals can steal magic and they can make magic and we can get to some kind of equilibrium so that we can do something about these crystals. Put them back inside a cavern, wall them up or something
Yeah.
so we can
Yeah.
continue to exist under the mountain because they need magic to live under there.
Wow.
There's a whole lot of other
Yeah.
stuff that goes on. There's like way there's that's like maybe 25% what goes on in those four books. But yeah.
This is super exciting. I love all the world building that goes into the epic fantasy and how it all sort of comes together, especially when you have characters hijacking
Oh yeah,
your outline.
book five was not supposed to like Guard was not supposed to lose his magic at the end of book four, but like the way it came out, he made the wrong decision. And I was like, crap. Now I have to let him. I have to let now we have to deal with the consequences. He made the wrong decision because he doesn't listen to outlines and it's his own thing. And so then I was like, book five was like he has no magic. There's a monster destroying things, and he's got his little son with him. Like, how is he going to do anything? He's now seeing what it's like for a regular person, and he doesn't like it.
Right. Like you can have your regular person stuff back.
Yeah. But the evil spirit that tricked him out of the magic, there was a whole catch to it, and he has to like unravel like how do I get my magic back? And since he has
Mm-hmm.
access to two different powers, one because he's a curse breaker, so he has the power to curse break, and then he has earth magic. With the earth magic he was born with, the ability to curse break he got because he was born under two curses. So if you're born under a curse, you have access to the ability to break curses. So you can go either way. You can either break curses or you can become someone who creates curses. You can however you want to go with that. And so
Wow.
he gets back the curse breaking one that won't let him do anything because it can only be used in specific circumstances. And he's like, well, that's great. I got the useless power back first. He's not happy. It's at the end of book. So he starts book six with the power that won't let him do anything.
Wow.
And he's like, I need the earth magic back. That way I can at least cast shields so I can keep my son from getting squashed. Because his son is like sticking him like glue. He does not want to go off and be safe and like
Yeah, yeah.
where would you even take your son where he would be safe? They live under a mountain. There's this monster like taking out the supports and crushing things. Like, where would you even put him to be safe?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm staying with you, Dad. We're gonna figure this out. And his son is his cheerleader.
Oh.
So
Oh, that's great.
yeah, that part's fun. Although it was a little bit dicey because the rule in the book is that the son can't get hurt. So but it has to be plausible. There has to be a plausible way of keeping him safe with that's believable. Because that's the contract that we make with my books make with the reader is that Ren will never get seriously hurt ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And until he's an adult, then the protection wears off. But while he's a child, he has to be kept safe. So we have there you'll see it in the books. There's a lot of really fun ways that we go about that. Usually
So,
Soren just throws a shield to him, but there's in the books where he doesn't have magic, that's not an option. So we have to get
right.
creative.
So if you're watching, this is a very action-packed series.
Yeah.
Lots of cool world building. Lots of cool how in the world did they manage that to go watch. I put the link to Melinda's website up earlier, but I also have it in the description box. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can hop down there, click the link, grab the first book for free, start reading it today. Or if you're not sure, you're like, well, I want to hear, go listen to the live read first and then get your free copy. And then you can get sucked into the series and be like, wait, I need more later on. If you're watching on Twitter, though, you can go to that website there. Melinda, thank you so much for joining and just chatting with us about your books and the amazing world and sharing, the story of your sister with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I just want to say one last thing. Like you can Chris Baker Enchanted. The ebook is free. There's also a digitally narrated audiobook that's free. The links to where you can get that is on my website. I also have the whole digitally narrated audiobook on YouTube that you can listen to for free, or you can get it for free from my website. Like there's multiple places. And no, digital narration is not the most. Some people really don't like that. So I am reading the book on my YouTube channel and also on my podcast. I have read the first part of Chris Baker Enchanted. It's in two parts because it should be two books, but the characters won't let me split it. So and I have that for like a small fee. You can get the first part as an audiobook. It's not everywhere, but there's links on my website because the podcast they're in like reverse chronological order, which doesn't work for like listening to parts of a novel. But on my YouTube page, I have the playlist that has them in order from first on, and I've been adding the chapters from the second part of the book as well to that. So there's like 10 or
Yes.
15 videos there. And also, I just want to say one last thing. The first book in his sister series, which is his Angelic Keeper, is it's technically a sequel to Chris Baker Enchanted. It is also free in both ebook and digitally narrated audiobook. I have not read that one yet, but I will be reading it on the podcast and YouTube after Chris Baker Enchanted is done, if it ever finishes.
Awesome.
It's a long book.
Yes.
And his series and her series they're so intertwined that like I just list them in the reading order as one series. They're not, but they're just so intertwined because she's in and out of his books and he's in and out of her books, and they're gonna keep doing this, so I'm just going to have to deal with that.
Yep. Let them do their thing and we'll keep reading it.
Yeah. I do have, for people who like box sets, there are box sets of both series. There's one mega box set that has the first 6 books of the Chris Baker series and the first 4 books of his sister series in one ebook, if that's what people want. But I also do have box sets of the first 3 books of the Chris Baker series. Books 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, and 9 are also a box set, and I have a box set of the first 3 books of his sister series. So however you like to read, like there's options.
Melinda's got you covered.
I just like some people, like I like box sets, so I'm like I've always making sure the box set readers are covered because I personally like them.
Yes, absolutely. So audiobook, YouTube narration, box set, regular ebook, go. It's all on Melinda's website. You can click there and see everything, like all the links to everything else. But thank you all so much for joining today. We'll be back tonight at 10 with a live read from C.H. Smith, who's also an epic fantasy author, reading an excerpt from his new dragon fantasy novel, Nothing More Than Zero. And Melinda, thank you so much for coming back and just joining us. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you. I hope the characters that live rent free in my head start living rent free in your head, so I'm not alone with that.
Yes, follow Melinda. You can send her messages and be like, "Why have you done this to me?"
Well, you can also read it. The newsletter is run by fictional characters. Usually, Rand is the one who writes them, but right now, Robin from the Robin Old Larkspur series is doing that. So if you like newsletters, I recommend getting it because when he gets back to narrating it again, the newsletter in a couple of weeks, I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say about someone else taking over his newsletter.
Oh, that's awesome. I love
Yes,
that so much. Well, thank you so much, Melinda. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.
thank
Thank you for
you.
joining.